go ahead and get started. I want to thank you guys all for coming to Short Sweet Film Festival and also to this little seminar. My name is Brian Bowers. Some of you guys I saw here earlier. I am a producer for the 48-Hour Film Project, which is the world's largest timed film competition. It's in over 130 cities around the world. The basic gist is filmmakers have 48 hours to write, produce, and edit a short film. They show up on a Friday night, they're given a character, a prop, and a line of dialogue, and then they draw a genre out of a hat. Then they have 48 hours to come up with the script, shoot everything, edit it, and get it back to us. And then we screen all of the short films as part of a premiere screening. These are done all locally in the cities that we do them. So in Cleveland, for example, we generally have between 40 and 48 film teams that will compete every year in our summer competition. And we show those films over the course of usually 2 or 3 screenings. And we have judges that are film professionals, actors, filmmakers themselves, producers, screenwriters, editors. They come and review the films and act as judges and jury. We show the top films again in what's called our best of screening, and then we give a variety of awards. The top film from each of our cities, individual cities, goes on to our festival, which is called Filmapalooza, which is all the top films from around the world, which are screened again, and then there's a whole global level of judging. That's in a different place around the world, everywhere. Monday, the day after we close down Short Sweet Film Festival, I'm getting on a plane going to Orlando to get ready for that, where we'll show all of our 2018 48-hour films. But so I've been involved with the 48-Hour Film Project since 2008, starting as the producer of the Cleveland competition. Then in 2010, I became Assistant Director of Operations for the company. So I work with the producers like myself in Cleveland, but in other cities around the world that are producing these events. So throughout the course of this time, I've watched thousands of short films. Many great ones, many not so great ones. In that time period, I also had the idea to come up with, we had many filmmakers that thought, well, I have a great place to show my films, but they wanted to get better at learning how to make them. So I came up with a company called Guerrilla Film School, which is take on guerrilla filmmaking, but of course I mean the gorilla with, you know, the monkey with the camera. And we teach filmmakers how to make better films and actors how to act on camera. And it's been a very fun experience, kind of learning about short films and breaking down the process of making short films. And I've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work, specifically in the short film format. So just kind of want to share some of that with you today. And this is really informal, so I'm going to go through some things. But if anybody has questions along the way, feel free to shout them out, and then I'll take some questions at the end as well. So, just out of curiosity, by show of hands, how many people in here are filmmakers? Good. And everybody else, you're just here to enjoy the festival?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, this will give you a much different perspective, probably, of what goes into making the films and conceptualizing the films. And what I always say is the number one most important thing about any sort of film is that you're telling a story. And a lot of it's easy for that to get lost in creating any sort of film because there's so many pieces and parts that go into it. You have to come up with a script, you have to get actors, you have to come up with a budget, you have to, build the sets and find locations and all these bits and pieces. And it's very easy for the story to get lost, but it's still the number one most important thing about a film. So, talk a little bit about first why short films? Like, why do people make short films at all, right? Because traditionally, you go to the theater to see a 90 to 2-hour feature film, right? Or on television, where you're watching, generally a hour block, which is slightly, the actual television show is less than that. So, any ideas about why people make short films?
It's shorter.
It is shorter, yes. Which means what?
Less money.
Less money, yes.
Tackles people's imagination in a different way. That's timeline.
Condensed timeline, very good.
Making lunch
I
instead
got
of dinner.
this. I got my fake whiteboard, so use it. So.
I think the shortness makes you focus quicker on the idea rather than drawing it out.
Focus quicker, less money. Less time.
Lunch instead of dinner.
Right. Any other ideas?
Exploration of new ideas.
Very good.
Right.
How about characters? To explore new characters and to see whether or not people like a character, or if a character if characters interact well with each other.
Challenge the filmmaker, perhaps.
Yeah.
See what they can do in a shorter amount of time.
Absolutely. That's the whole essence of the 48-hour film project. We've not only given you a very short amount of time to make a short film, we've also thrown extra elements in there, by having to have a character prop and line, and by not knowing the genre, to really make sure that everything is done, because we've found that those extra constraints actually make people more creative. And a lot of times we see better film ideas that come out of the 48-hour film project than we see where people have spent months and months of time in production and pre-production and thousands of dollars in the budget. It's amazing what you can actually do when you're given a challenge. Another reason people make short films, proof of concept. Part of the business of making films is you gotta raise money for it, right? So, especially if you're a newer filmmaker, people don't necessarily want to hand you a check for $20 million to shoot your feature film. So short films are a great way to show maybe part of what you want to get across in a feature, or to show a characters, or to show really the concept of what the film could be, and then use that to sell to investors or people that might want to support your film.
On the proof of concept idea, though, if you needed to raise money to do the short film,
Yep.
how do you do a teaser for a short film to raise money? Is it shorter, the teaser?
A teaser? Yeah. Teaser is usually shorter than a short film. We'll talk about film length too, in a little bit, but a teaser could be as little as 15 or 20 seconds, depending on exactly what you're doing. The whole point of proof of concept idea is to show enough that it's going to generate interest for the project and still get across a basis of what the story's about. And I'll give one example. How many people like horror films? Ooh. What? Okay.
Horror films.
I love horror films. So
Okay.
I've seen every bad horror film there is. And I will tell you that I've seen all the Saw films, and I saw the first Saw film in the theater, and I'm proud to say that. I would not go see any more of them in the theater at this point. But the first Saw film was actually created as a short film. Director James Wan had this idea for this character, a creepy guy that was getting revenge on people and coming up with all these traps. But he didn't have investors for it. He didn't really have a script written at all. So what he did was he had basically a sketch of ideas in his head about what he thought it should be or could be. So he created the bear trap, booby trap, which if you've ever seen Saw, you'll know what I'm talking about. And basically created one prop to use for the film, and created one giant extended scene, essentially. I don't remember how long the original one was, so I'm not going to make something up. But basically it all centered around one scene, one idea that was used in what became the full feature-length film of Saw. But it was enough to get his point across. It was something that he could do very quickly, very inexpensively, and he, of course, was successful in getting people to back it up based on that short film. And it's become one of the most successful modern horror franchises, for sure. And you can actually you can find the short films out there online. So if you don't mind a little bit of gore, and you want to see a good example of how a short film becomes a feature, go find the original Saw short film and then go out and rent the Saw movie, the first one with Carrie Elways. And then you will have a very good idea of how you can take one idea from that and turn that into a proof of concept short. One more reason that people might want to make a short film, which I actually see a lot of, is to find great people to work with. 80% of any great film is finding the right people to support the vision of the writer and the vision of the director. And you can break it down, pretty much across the board. 80% of directing is casting. 80% of all those awesome effects is finding the right people to, have to be your creative director, your audio designer, all those sorts of people. So how do you find them? You need to be out making short films if you're a filmmaker, and finding who can do whose work do you like, and who are people that you would want to spend months and months with. Because I'll tell you, if you can't spend 48 hours working with someone on a short film, you're definitely not going to want to spend months and months working with that person on a large feature film. So it's better to find that out when you're making the short.
Speed dating.
Speed dating. There you go. Want to talk about some of the reasons to tell a film in general. Because we have different types of films, right? There's some that tell a story. They all tell some sort of story, but some are very story-based. What's another reason besides just telling a story with visuals?
To convey a message or a thing.
Bring an idea to life.
A message.
Evoke an emotion.
I'm going to take that one step further to say specifically to invoke an emotion in the people that are watching it, the audience. Did you?
What is the definition of a short film? What is your definition of a short film?
My definition of short film is a film that's under 40 minutes, which is long, so this is a very broad definition. Film that's under 40 minutes that tells a very singularly focused story. And I'll get into that more in just a minute. A few more examples of the purpose of film or the kinds of films that we could tell. Advertisement. Sure.
Yeah.
Character-driven films.
Character studies. Pure entertainment. Pure schlock.
Escapism. Yes.
Escapism. Any artists? Art, the purpose of sharing a vision, a creative vision. Because there's a much different purpose in an art film than there is a film that tells, a traditional narrative story.
Conveying a vision or an idea.
Yeah.
Political.
Lots of different reasons for film. Now the thing is, a lot of the films that we're used to seeing, feature films, they frequently do use more than one of these to tell the story. So you might be telling a story, but you're also entertaining, or you're also getting a message across. Or you might tell a story, but you also have a character study. Country for Old Men, for example. That's one that comes to mind. You could have one that entertains, but also poses philosophical discussions. The film Dogma, by Kevin Smith, hilarious, but there's very much a meaning behind it. The biggest difference between a feature film and short film, to me, is that with all these different things, you can mix and match on a feature, but a short film, the best short films and most successful ones, in my experience, have one singular focus. Because you have a very limited amount of time with the audience. The audience's brain really only has a certain amount of time to process and to kind of consider one idea in a clear way in that compressed amount of time. So what does that mean? That means anything that doesn't support your one thing should be cut away, because it's only going to muddy the waters of the story that you're trying to tell. And in fact, one of the hardest things to do in creating a short film is to cut away all the extra stuff that doesn't support the one idea. I'll give you an example of a common story structure. One of the most common story structures called the hero's journey. This is based on, how many people have heard this hero's journey? Okay. Basically, this is based off Joseph Campbell's book on mythology, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. This is not necessarily steps that you must follow, but in Campbell's research, he found that most successful stories follow this example. So it's based off of a proven method of storytelling through the ages, and filmmakers have used this to use as a successful format for telling a story on film because they know it works. Great example, Star Wars. George Lucas, based Star Wars off of the hero's journey. Luke. And there's three main parts of it, which is actually broken down into other sub-steps along the way. But the three main parts are the departure, where the hero leaves the world that he knows behind, leaves the familiar behind him. The initiation, where the hero learns to navigate through this new, unfamiliar world. He faces challenges along the way. This is where, Luke is called away from his planet to go search for Leia, who's the mysterious message from Leia, and then comes across, the Jedi and Darth Vader and all those challenges in his quest, and then finally the return, which is where the hero returns back to his original familiar world. So those are the three main parts. These make up what is called the traditional three-act structure of a feature film. Beginning, middle, end, generally. Now, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult to pull off this format successfully in a short film. Because when you're compressing that hero's journey, which we know is a successful format that we would want to use to tell a story, when you're compressing that into, even 40 minutes, which is, about a third of the time of a feature, it just doesn't work as effectively. And you end up with characters that are underdeveloped. You end up with stories that take giant leaps in either in time or in the audience's imagination. So, you'll find when people try and have this whole gigantic story into a short film format, because they don't have time to do everything, you have to skip over many important parts. And so you end up with a film that is jumbled, confusing, hard to follow, and the audience really doesn't buy into. If you've seen, I think it's Tommy Boy, there's the Chris Farley character, fat guy in a little coat. You picture Chris Farley trying to squeeze into the tiny coat. That's what happens when you try and squeeze a full feature-length hero's journey story into a short film. And it's falling apart at the seams, literally. So what does work? Focusing on one thing, one part of the hero's journey. Maybe that's one challenge that the hero faces along the way. Maybe that's one change that a character goes through in the story. Often in a feature film, characters go through many changes, but in a short film, you want to focus on one. That way, the audience can see where the character started and where they're going to, and they have time to actually take that in, and for their brains to believe that the character has gone through that change in the time that you've allowed. One message that you'd like to share, or one feeling that you'd like the audience to leave with. Again, you know, we watch certain films, they make us feel many different things. We might feel, you know, we've had a good time at the end, but there's also, you know, a sense of loss. When you try to add too many things to the short story format, it just doesn't work. Length. So we talked about 40 minutes. That's kind of an arbitrary time because that's what the Academy Awards has decided is the maximum length for that a short film can be to qualify for an Academy Award. That's pretty long for most short films. I said earlier, traditional TV episodes follow that 30-minute format, which is actually about 22 minutes worth of actual content. So our attentions are kind of tuned in to kind of pay attention for things that long. So 22 minutes is a good length to shoot for a short film. But I've seen many great films that are 10 to 12 minutes. And in fact, for the 48-hour film project, our short films have to be between 4 and 7 minutes long. Part of that's because there's just not enough time in 48 hours to do something much longer than that. But to be completely honest, out of the 4 to 7 minute films, the best films that I've seen are the ones that are closer to the 4-minute mark than they are to the 7-minute mark. Because what happens is when you start really focusing on the one idea, the one thing, you develop a vocabulary for filmmaking that is very concise, and you really begin to just rip away all the extraneous stuff that does not support your one idea that you want to leave the audience with. And you'll find that if you really can focus on that, it's actually better to create the shorter film. There's an old saying, I think it was in the ad agency world, about copy, like how long should copy be? And I think this goes for short film as well. They would say it should be the length of a woman's skirt, which is short enough to keep it interesting, but long enough to cover the details. So, we're just about out of time, so I just want to talk about a couple more things to consider when making short films. One is the cinematic quality. Many short films are done on very low budgets for the reasons we talked about. Shot on DSLR cameras, the new mirrorless cameras, and even phones now. Steven Soderbergh has said that he's He shot the movie Unsane on an iPhone 7. It's really the first mainstream film that we've seen that was shot entirely on an iPhone, and he said he's not going back. He's not going to shoot on, traditional cameras anymore. That said, when you're shooting on these lower budget phones, DSLR cameras, that doesn't mean that they can't still be cinematic. There are plenty of cinematic lenses that have wide apertures that give you the very focused look and that creamy background that you see in a film, like traditional film stock. You can find those now that will go on a DSLR camera for like a few $100s. They even make adapters that will go over your phone to create a wide-angle lens or a telephoto lens. So definitely possible to have a cinematic-looking film using very inexpensive equipment in the short film format. There's also new technology. In the old days, you had the gigantic cranes and the steady cams were these, thousands and thousands of dollars to use these things. Now all that stuff is readily accessible and within the budget of, any of us in here, any person off the streets.
You're talking about drones replacing the cranes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Drones, you can get a drone camera for, depending on the quality, $100 up to, for under $1,000, and you will have a nice looking shot that replaces a crane. And you'll be able to do probably even more because you can have more control over it. Also, plenty of things you can do with lighting and using things like inexpensive poster board as reflectors, black poster board as flags, ripstop material as diffusion material. They now make, I have an LED light in my closet. It's like a little stick that actually charges with a USB charger. There are now filmmakers creating films using those sort of lights because the technology is good enough that you can use lower, you don't need as powerful a light. Yeah.
$5.
Yep.
Battery included.
There you go. So there's plenty of options out there for lighting. And then finally audio. Audio accounts for half the film. And the number one problem that I see, especially with short films, outside of the story, but technical problems, is a film having bad audio. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that audiences will forgive not so good footage. It's easy to watch a film that's been shot on an iPhone if it has great audio. But the minute an audience can't understand what people are saying, or if they hear the wind over the actors, that is completely unforgivable in film. It totally takes people out of the world. So, and audio is half the film, again. Plenty of options for audio, including controlling your environment, which just comes down to choosing locations that are not next to a highway, or making sure that you have people's cell phones off, refrigerators unplugged, things that are going to hum, lights, blowers, things like that. All that stuff makes noise and gets picked up by audio equipment. But that's one thing that you can control, even if you can't afford expensive mics. And then finally, that you can get inexpensive equipment, and a great example is what I'm using right here, which is plugged into my phone. It's a very inexpensive shotgun mic that I got off of Amazon for like $30. and it plugs right into my iPhone, and this is going to give me probably 10 times better audio quality than using the camera that is built into, or the microphone that's built into my camera back there. So, all things to consider for short films and lower budget films. So, I've gone a little bit over the time, and the other program's going to start. I'm available. Does anybody have any questions really quickly?
I have a couple questions,
Yeah,
if I may.
absolutely.
First, as someone who is interested in film, but is kind of on the outside, I kind of view one of the purposes of short film to get into the practice of making a feature-length film.
Yeah.
So just like making short films would help you get into the practice of that, is there anything, out of curiosity, that would help in preparation of making a short film? Anything that someone would need to know or to practice or make in the steps of making a short film?
That's different than a feature film, or
just to I guess sort of get their feet wet so that when they start making
a short film? Yeah. I think it's really important to go through the same steps that you would in a feature film. And I'll tell you, the reason that most people don't is because most people just get into this because they just want to try it out, right? There's a lot of people that make videos for YouTube, or they're like, why don't I do the 48-hour film project? They've never taken a filmmaking class, you know, they don't necessarily know that they should storyboard or, you know, write out a script even, or even, you know, have a script. You know, they might say, you know, why don't you say this, and I'll say something like this, and, you know, that's how a lot of these things kind of start in the beginning. But a really good practice is to, even when you're working on a short film, you know, go through those same steps. So come up with a story. And, you know, it's fine to start with a larger story because you might want to use this for another project. But when it comes time to create the script and decide what you're going to focus on, that's when you really want to hone in and say, well, okay, I have this great idea, but that's really a feature-length idea. So what one part of that is going to work for short film? Write a script, you know, storyboard out the scenes.
And you just said something that kind of ties into my second and final question, that being that something you mentioned earlier, how Saw was originally a short film and then it became a feature-length film. If someone hypothetically had, or if you've experienced someone who had an idea for a short film, for say closer to that 4-minute mark, and then they had the opportunity to expand it into a feature-length film, what are some of the, I would imagine that there's a bit of a challenge in that, taking a smaller story and trying to expand it and add elements to make it longer. Are
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we have people that do this all the time, especially in the 48-hour film project specifically, because, you know, they come up with this idea and they make this short film. And they're like, wow, this was really cool, but, you know, what would be really cool is if we worked on this more and, like, fleshed this out into, like, a feature film. So I think the challenge lies in
Going deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets in how it gets developed in the first place. So, you know, if you've started with a large idea and focus in on the short film, then you already probably might have a good idea of what the large idea is going to be. But if you've just gone and created the short film, you want to think this is one part of the journey, right? Or this is one part of the story. So what's this story, how do I want people to feel at the end, okay? And whose story do I want to tell? Those are two important questions to ask. Because you will find that the good short films are maybe focused on one character, which is good, and that person might be the central character, but you're going to have other characters along the way. So coming up with how those other characters interplay and where they, how they influence your character, the decisions that your main character makes, and kind of the, what's even the inciting incident for whatever journey the character is going to go on. Those are all things that you would need that are important to figure out if you're taking a film from short to feature length.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Other questions?
What's the one thing that's difficult in mechanizing or cutting the cost in short films? You talk about equipment and audio. What's the one thing that is the obstacle to cutting costs? What's the one important thing
that you can't cut?
Right.
This will sound crazy, but food. You gotta feed the actors,
Craft.
right? And
Craft
not just
services.
actors, yeah. Because it's if you've not made a film, it might sound very funny to say this, but you can get away with not paying people. People will work on short films, especially for because they love the idea, because they want to work with you. I had all these actors came in earlier that just I was like, hey, you want to do this? It's not a big time commitment, right? But when we came over for rehearsal, I had appetizers and I had beer and wine and stuff because people, just from the practical sense, when you're on set, you need to feed everybody. You need to take care of their basic needs. And also it makes people feel valued as well. And there's a big thing, because because the short film format, again, is one that's done, it's not an amateur format by any means. There's plenty of professional filmmakers that work in that short film format. Oates Studios, Neil Blomkamp is a great example. He, the film Chappie and the film District 9, was the director of those. Now he just makes all these short films through this company called Oates Studios, and they're just fun ideas that he wants to explore. So, the point is, you have to take care of people in that way, and you need to make sure that they're valued and respected, and that's the one thing that you just can't cut out.
I never would have thought that.
Yeah. I mean, you can shoot a film on a phone. You could use, you can DIY the audio. You could use no lights and no extra mics if you do it well. You can write the script. Those are all things you can do for no money, but you have to pay for food, or you have to provide food.
I had a question about the 48-hour. How does it work for your music composers? Like when they're how much time do they have to create the music for?
So with our rules, you're not required to create music in the 48-hour time period. You are allowed to license music, but you do have to have the rights to use it. So most often that's stock music that people are using. There's some services, that are like the more expensive ones, like Artist.io, I think is one where you could actually license some indie label type music. However, that being said, we have many of our films that have original scores, and it's just one more element to it, because I think the way that it's done most often is they kind of have the composer as part of the storytelling process. Because normally the way it works is, Friday night everybody's writing, Saturday it's all production, Sunday's editing, and then they turn. But the composer is generally part of that process on the Friday night during the storytelling. So they at least have a vibe of what it's going to be, what the concept's going to be, what they want people to feel, and they might start to work on some ideas on Saturday. But again, it's tough to do it until you have picture lock, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that doesn't happen until Sunday.
Yeah.
So it's there's certainly no definitive format for doing that. Just what I know from kind of behind the scenes, that's how a lot of the people that do it.
Okay. Because I'd love to be able to sign up as a composer. Is there a process?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do all sorts of networking events. I think I have a couple postcards. If you go to this website,
And people recruit their crews, actors, production crews on the Facebook groups.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we have a Facebook page, we have a Facebook group, which is very active. As the 48-Hour Film Project, we host our own networking events throughout the year. That's actually the best way because a lot of connections are made through those. Filmmakers, actors, composers come to them. And they hook up and work on other projects outside of 48 as well. We also have something that we're rolling out this year called the Creative Directory, which is going to be for all 48-hour participants around the world. So anybody can join it, and we'll have like specific forums. So there'll be like a Cleveland forum where you can say, I'm a composer, I want to be on a team. And you can do a profile in the Creative Directory where you can have links to your website, you can post your reel, you're an actor, you can post headshots and your resume and stuff like that. And basically like kind of like a casting site for casting crew, and the ability to have ads. So you can say, I'm a composer looking for a team, or I have a team and I'm looking for actors, or I'm looking for this. So,
because I'm just thinking, just the idea of being a composer, like, because you said it's in different cities, like I can imagine going to different cities and just saying, like, hey, I'm a composer, I'm interested in working with these different teams in all these different cities. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we have. There's people that do this all over.
Okay.
You don't even have to travel, to be honest, because you don't have to be.
Yeah.
The composer doesn't have to be in the city.
Physically.
That's why I was thinking it's easier to say composer.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any cost that goes to applying to join the 48?
The teams pay to register, so like they'll pay like as a team they'll pay a fee, but there's no fee to participate. You pay to go see the film.
Yeah.
We do screen all the films. It's like $10 a ticket,
Okay.
what you would pay normally. But no, like just to sign up and be on a team, there's no cost for it.
Yeah, basically the producer is the one who comes up with the money and then can get the team members
Sometimes they
to
all pull
contribute.
in. Yeah.
And
It's like 100, it ranges depending on when you sign up, but it's generally about $150 to do this. And you're guaranteed a screening. If you turn in a film, you're guaranteed to screen it. Unless for some reason it doesn't, take like 4 months. But, other than that, which is pretty amazing because it's one of the only things where if you submit a film, it's going to be shown in a movie theater.
Yeah.
And for many people, this is the only opportunity they have to see their film on a big screen. So,
participating in a 48-hour film project is a concentrated film school experience.
Yep.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. I had another question actually when you were saying about short films and about the 40-minute length. What about if you have a series of short films that are kind of stacked together? is that something that, because I like the concept how you're saying about like being very focused. Like, do you feel that if you are to have like say 3 films that kind of overlap the concept, does that pull away from your concept of just having a singular vision, or?
Well, not necessarily. I guess it depends on how you're trying to. So you're talking about more of like a series, or like?
Yeah, I'm thinking like, say if it were something where you had 3 short films that all kind of deal with the same theory, same kind of vision, but it's just kind of told in 3 different ways.